at 3.4, determining the equation of a line. So if you recall, linear equations are in the form, or have the form of y equals mx plus b. So m is our slope, b is our initial value or our y-intercept. So for example 1, it says write the equation of the line in the form of y equals mxb when slope is equal to 1 and y-intercept is equal to -2. So all you're going to do for this is you're going to always start your equation with y equals, so slope, if you remember, is the m value. So you're literally going to put in this m value, and then you're going to put your x, because slope belongs to x. And then your y-intercept, if you remember, is your b value. So you're literally going to take this and put it in. So sometimes here you might get something, just trying to add a text box. So sometimes you're going to get, for an equation like this, x minus 1. So this is okay, because when we don't have a number here, we assume it's 1, and that's fine. Sometimes when you write this, you might start it by writing y equals 1x, and since we have a plus here, sometimes people might do this, plus minus 1. But if you recall from integers, we don't really do a double sign like this. When we have a positive and a negative, you have to get rid of the positive to equal 1. So this is an acceptable answer, like it is here, and this is also an acceptable answer. So when you're working with your equations of lines, you need to, what's most important is making sure that your slope value is correct and your b value is correct with the integer. So for this question, it says you're going to write an equation of a line that's parallel to this line with a y-intercept of -3. So if you remember that this is the slope value, so parallel lines have the same slope value, this y-intercept is our b value. So if you're writing an equation for this line, you're going to have y equals, you're going to have the exact same slope value with our variable x, but instead of doing +8 here, we're going to change the y-intercept, like this question asks, to -3. So a parallel line would have y equals -0.75x minus 3. Example 2 says, for the graph, state the slope as a fraction in lowest terms. So the slope of this line, if we take a point on our graph, we've got this point here, and let's use this point here. So our slope is 1, 2, 3 down, so -3, and from this point we've got a run of 1. So our slope is -3. The y-intercept is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So that's at +6. So the equation of our line here would be y equals -3x plus 6. Let's just move that up there a bit. So the equation of this line is -3x plus 6. So example 3 says solve for b. So when we have an unknown in an equation, we're basically going to solve for that unknown. And you guys have solved equations before. So if we're going to solve this, this would be 8 is equal to, and then you're going to multiply the 3 and the 2, which would be 6, and then we haven't done anything with our plus b yet, so that just kind of stays there. Oh my, okay. So here we're going to rearrange this equation. We're going to take this positive 6 and bring it to the other side of the equation. When we do that, our integer sign on the 6 changes to a negative, and that's going to be equal to b. 8 minus 6 is 2 is equal to b. Therefore, the b value for this in terms of, if we had this in terms of y equals mx plus b, our b value would be positive 2. Example 4 says a line with a slope m equals 2 passes through the point 4, 3. Determine the equation of the line. So in order to write the equation of the line, you need to know the m and the b values. So if we're going to do this question, if we're looking at this question here, we are going to start with the form of y equals mx plus b. So here we're gonna sub in what we know. So if you recall, when you have a pair of coordinates, this is your y value, this is your x value. That's not right. This is your x value, this is your y value. So when we go to write our equation, we're gonna just sub in what we know. So for the next line, we know our y value is 3. We know our slope is 2. We know that our x value given in the equation is 4. And we don't know our b value. So we're just going to solve like we did in the last example. So haven't done anything with that 3. 2 times 4 is 8 plus b. Then we're going to take this 8 and send it over to the other side of the equal sign by subtracting it. And our b value becomes, so 3 minus 8 is negative 5, is equal to b. So determine the equation of the line. So if we know that this is our b value, the equation of the line, the final equation of the line would be y equals our slope value of 2x, and then we substitute in our b value that we solved for down here. So these 2 points get subbed into this equation here to help us solve for b so that there's only one unknown. And then once we find that b value, we put it back into this equation and replacing the y and the x as variables like we did here. So this says a line with a slope of 6 passes through the point -1, 8. Determine the equation of the line. So we're going to basically do the same thing that we did on the last example. So y equals mx plus b. And then we're going to sub in our points. So we know that this here is our x, this here is our y. So our y value is 8, our slope is 6, my x is -1, and we are solving for b. So again, solving this equation, so 6 times -1 is -6. We're going to take this -6 and send it over, changing the integer sign. And then we have 14 equals b. So if we are going to do our final equation of the line to determine the equation of the line, we're going to go back to our y equals, so back to this formula and replacing our variables, or our numbers back to variables. So y equals our slope with an x, and then our b value, which was positive 14, gets put into this equation. So example 6 says a line passes through the points -3, 6, and 4, 3. Determine the equation of the line. So this is where, in the last note, we had the slope formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 2 minus x 1. So when we're given 2 points, like we are in this question, we have to find slope by doing this. This is our starting point. So this is the first set of coordinates. So these would be our x1, 1, and this would be our y1. This would be our x2. This would be our y2. So you're going to sub in the points into this equation. So our y2 is 3 minus our y1, which is 6, divided by our x2, which is 4. This is where we get a little tricky. Minus our x1 value is -3. So don't just write -3 here. It's minus -3. And you will know that these two negatives make a positive. So when we solve this, we have -3 minus 6, which gives us -3. And then you have 4 plus, because two negatives make a positive, 3, which would give us a slope of 3/7, 3/7. So once you have that, you're going to go back to your formula of y equals mx plus b. So when we sub to find what the value of b is, we can use any one of these points to start solving. So I'm going to just use this point because everything's positive and I like to use positive numbers better. So my y value is 3. My slope is -3/7 x. And then we don't know what the b value is. Move that up there. We need to actually replace the x value with the value here. So if we are solving, I'm going to write it with the marker so you can see that we're multiplying fractions. So -3/7 times 4. So we need to multiply this fraction here. So when we multiply that, we're going to get -12/7. So when I come back to writing it here, I'm going to have 3 equals -12/7 plus b. So we're going to move this -12/7 to the other side of the equation and change it to addition. 12/7 is equal to b. So when adding fractions, if you remember, so again, I'll come back outside of that box and we can add the fractions. So we've got 3 plus 12/7. So we need to have a common denominator, and the common denominator between, we assume that this is 1, is between 1 and 7 is actually 7. So when we multiply this by 7, we have to multiply this by 7 to get an equivalent fraction. So this is going to give us, here 21/7 plus 12/7. Adding fractions, we just add the numerators together. This is going to give us 33/7. So if we come back here to this equation, we're going to get 33/7 is equal to b. So now we know our slope value from here, and we know our b value. So we're ready to write the equation of the line. So the final equation of the line would be y equals, so we put back our y and our x's, we sub in our slope that we found to be negative 3 over 7, and then x, and we add in what we found to be our b value, which is 33 over 7. And fractions are allowed to be in these types of equations. So there's one more question. It says for you guys to try it on your own. You can try that, and we can take it up at another time. Check your weekly schedule for the practice questions for this lesson. Thanks.